afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 13th Annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I'm Jamie Machek with the Wisconsin Valley Library Service, and today I am moderating the management track, and assisting me is Leah Langby from the IFLIS Library System. So thank you, Leah. We've had two fantastic sessions so far in this track, and I know this one will be the same. Our presenter for this session is Jamie LaRue, and Jamie comes to us from Colorado, the Garfield County Public Library District. And Jamie is going to be talking about what are ways that we can get our employees back on track, and we'll take questions throughout. So Jamie, whenever you're ready, please begin.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, I've got so many slides, so I'll just kind of jump in and start pounding on it. So the first one is, here's what we hope to kind of get at today. Trying to get somebody back on track isn't just one magic phrase. I wish it were. In fact, there's a whole system around it. We have to hire the right people, mostly for emotional maturity. We have to ensure that the job expectations are communicated to the employee and that they're understood. And we have to make sure that the feedback is very specific, and that's kind of the key to the whole thing today. And then finally, we want to plan and practice for employee meetings to ensure that the feedback we give is unambiguous, there are deadlines, and there are consequences. So I'm going to start with this one. Have you ever worked with someone who should have been fired? And I know that the answer is yes. So all of us have. I do sometimes a whole workshop just on this one slide. But the point is that sometimes supervisors will go 20 years avoiding a 20-second talk. So here's kind of how to do it. And the idea is that you have to separate the judgment about somebody's conduct or character and just replace it with the specifics of the behavior. The story was, when I was working as a graduate assistant, I was very self-absorbed. My girlfriend broke up with me. I was feeling sorry for myself, and I was sitting as the page supervisor in the grand stacks with my feet up on the desk, feeling sorry for myself. My boss walked past Frankie, and she said, "Jamie, I wonder if you could just step into my office for a minute." And I thought, oh, here it comes. And she gave me what I have come to think of as the 20-second talk. She said, "It's not hard for me to find someone to become a graduate assistant. We are looking for people who are interested, engaged, trying to learn, and they're active. Right now, that's not you. This is not the first time this week I've walked past and seen you sitting there with your feet on the desk. So I want you to take some time to think about what you want to do while you're here and come back and talk to me next Tuesday and tell me what you've decided." And I have to tell you that that brief, pointed comment to me, notice that she never raised her voice. She never, made any kind of weird comments about me. It was just, we need someone who is engaged. And right now, that's not you. How specific is this? Your feet were on the desk. What am I going to say? Those are not my feet. That's not my desk. It's like she got my attention. And then she handed it back to me. Now that I've communicated as clearly as possible what I want from you, what are you going to do? And I have to say that I was taken completely by surprise. I went home that night. I was embarrassed and ashamed. I went back the next day and I said, "Frankie, I'm so sorry that, of course, I do want to demonstrate my worth to this. I care very much about the job, and I'll stop acting like a jerk, and I'll try to prove that you've hired the right person." I went back to her about 3 years later to say, "I want to thank you for saving my career, because at just the right moment, you reminded me I work for people, and it's like I'm supposed to give my best." Some years later, I was the director of the Douglas County Libraries, and I woke up in the cold sweat in the middle of the night, realizing that 5 people were holding our library hostage. There were things we had talked about and wanted to get done, and 5 people all across the organization were just quietly sabotaging that. And so I said, you know what? Let's have the 20-second talk with them. Let's practice it. Let's figure out exactly what the behavior is. Let's make sure we're being fair about it. Let's get some real rehearsals about this and take care of it. And of those 5 people, when you have this conversation, which is very powerful, very quick, and again, really not a conversation, a very direct talk where it's like putting a pin in a bubble, you pop it open and say, "Have I got your attention?" what happens is either they straighten up, and I had one person say, "Oh my God, like me, you're right. I'm so sorry. I'll try to fix that." Or they kind of try, but they need help, and that's okay. Somebody says, "Okay, I didn't realize that was a problem, but I'll try to be right." Then we need to support them. And then some people will fight you every step of the way. I don't know what you're talking about. It's denial or it's passive aggressive behavior. It's all these things. Or in many of the cases, I find that when you have this 20-second talk, a miracle happens. They come back the next day and they say, "You know what? I'm fighting you because I don't believe in what we're doing. I think I would be happier somewhere else." And they leave. So that's what happens at the very end. This is the worst case scenario. And I'm here to tell you that even some of the most intransigent problem employees you have can be dealt with in 20 seconds if you follow this format. But it's all based on very specific feedback. So the sad truth is, in 45 years of librarianship, that's what I've been, I've learned that the conscientious people who work in libraries, and they are very conscientious, many supervisors have never been told this truth. It's your job to maintain high standards. It's your job to make sure that people are living up to the expectations of the library. It's a wonderful place to work. While few of us are eager for confrontation, straight talk doesn't have to be a yelling match. It should be direct, kind, and specific. It just saves so much trouble. And waiting till it's too late serves no one. So I'm going to race through some of these slides and then kind of come back to this coaching model that I think is very helpful. The question to ask if somebody is really misbehaving is, whose fault is it? And it's very easy for supervisors to say, well, it's the employee's fault. But I want to say that since we're talking to supervisors, did the supervisor hire the right person? Maybe you inherited them. Did you orient them? Did you tell them that we're trying to make some specific kinds of changes? Did you invest in their growth and engagement? Did you step in when they had trouble to help them get it right? Or if you've tried all these things, have you recognized that the employee can't be saved and it's time for everybody to move on? So a reminder that we want the employee to succeed, right? And it doesn't do any good for the bad apple to leave. You ran off someone who was not performing well if you don't know how to recognize a good one. So we started at the end, kicking somebody out, but I want to go back to the beginning and get up to that coaching. So the most important thing I've learned is to hire for emotional intelligence. What is EI? It refers to the ability to identify and manage your own emotions and to sense and mirror the emotions of others. Years ago, in Douglas County, we had a kind of a training program where we focused on communication styles. And after 2 years of this, I said, okay, well, people kind of fall into four broad quadrants. What kind of employees, what kind of communication style makes for the best supervisors? And my training manager thought about that and came back and said, I went back and I looked at everyone we've got, and it doesn't matter. What matters is not your own orientation to this, your own, kind of skills or intelligence. What matters is your ability to flex to somebody else's style. And so recognizing EI comes down to how do you recognize the skills you need? If I were to say, so if you're going to hire any library employee, not a specific job, but in general, you're going to give me a list that's something like what's on the list. On the left, it's adaptable, alert, collaborative, communicative, courteous, curious. They have humor. They show initiative. They're integrity. They're friendly. And then that behavior is the right-hand column. They can flex on the fly. They're aware of changes in the environment. They like working with people. They make clear statements. They're polite. They show genuine interest. They have smile lines around their eyes. They step up, they hold to their values, and they're approachable. So that's kind of like we always are looking for those things. Too often, and I know particularly this happens in rural areas, you don't wait for the job to open before you start looking for someone to fill it. And in some rural libraries, you get two applicants and you hire the one who's not as bad as the other. That's not how to do it. You need to know what you need based on that organizational goals and gaps that you see in your talent, and you are looking all of the time. So if there's a barista who always gets everybody's name right and never messes up an order, you say, ever thought about working for the library? The movie clerk who smiles at everyone and never loses her cool. The person walking her dog that stops to give good directions to somebody. Always be looking for talent and always be looking for people that represent the population that you serve. And then the next big piece about getting somebody in to coach them is that, did you interview them well? And I find that about 50% of the hires that are made in almost any business are not very well done because we ask people to describe their skills instead of showing us them. And I'll give you a very quick example of this. At one of my libraries, we were getting about an intellectual freedom challenge every week. It was from a local church in the area. And so when I had three candidates, I said, what I'd like you to do is to sit here in the office, pretend that you got the job as branch manager, and we have a patron who's very upset about a book. And I brought in somebody who had been challenged. She was an actress, actually, and she said, I found this book, The Joy of Gay Sex, in the library, and oh my God, I can't believe you've got it. And in the first case, the candidate remained seated at the desk as the person stood at the doorway to come in, and they had a conversation. The conversation was good, and they more or less resolved it. Second person stood up when my actor came in to complain, and they had that conversation as they were both standing, and the conversation was okay. But in the third case, the applicant stood up from the desk, came around the desk, shook her hand, asked her to sit, and sat down next to her across from the desk. Again, had the same conversation. Who do you hire? In that case, you're looking for specific behaviors that weren't just about what we said, but it was about how we said them. It was about communication behavior. I think that one of the biggest mistakes we make when we hire is we don't actually put people in a spot where they have to demonstrate the skills, and we have to know what those skills are. I'm going to jump ahead now to this onboarding thing, and I realize I'm racing through these large sections about personnel management, but I want to get to the coaching. So onboarding, many people have often assumed that like just computer training, the computer training on the system is onboarding, but all of these things need to come first. More important than category is a thoughtful consideration for your institution. What we're looking for is how do you give a systematic orientation to culture and work expectations. Culture kind of falls into three things. It's what you advertise for, what you train for, and how it really is. What it comes down to is how do we treat each other and how do we treat our patrons? And it could be captured by a catchphrase. We give 110%. Patrons first. We're bold and curious. It could be an institutional story. We went from the worst library in the state to the best in the nation. It could be we earned the community's trust. But few of us take the time to think about the culture and tell people you're joining a group that's like this. Customer service. I truly believe that our whole story in a library is told in the first 30 seconds of walking into our building. Somebody makes eye contact with you and smiles or doesn't. And establishing that just relationship with someone that says you are seen may be the single most important thing we do for our whole society. Library organization, you have to spend some time deciding how do things get decided around here. If I have a question, do I take it up to the director every time or do we try to resolve it at the lowest level? Just what's the chain of command and how do we like to talk about things? Communications, if I'm curious about what has been decided, what the rules are, how do I find out about those things? And then finally, that just absolutely building the skills that you need to do the job. A solid onboarding process makes the employee feel welcome, lets them know what they're getting into, and kind of prepares them to succeed at the job. Now we're at the kind of the heart of this. So the model I'm going to give you here is a little bit old now, 2010, but it's not a bad place to begin. The idea is that when you see that somebody is having difficulty with their performance, there are three categories, dimensions of that performance that can help you figure out how to help them. So one of them is abilities. Can they do the job? Do they have the skills and the knowledge to be able to perform? The second one is kind of talking about engagement. Do they feel connected? Are they floating through the job or are they making eye contact and connections and communicating with people and really part of the team? And then the last one, I think something often too often overlooked is aspiration. What do people kind of want to get out of this? Where do they want to grow? So I'll give you kind of three cases. Meet Vince. Vince is an engaged dreamer. He's very engaged in the organization. He's very ambitious to move up, but he doesn't always show that he has the skills to do his job. So while those of you who pull up your chat, do you have anybody like this? And what would you recommend that you should do as a supervisor when you have somebody who's sitting on two cylinders? They're engaged, they want to move up, but they don't show up with the abilities that they need. What do you think they should be doing? And so just type in some ideas.
So Lori suggested provide training.
Okay. Training is clearly the first one to go for. It's like, so if you lack the skills, you can say to them, here's what kind of the assessment of the skills. We're seeing some gaps. We're going to put you to that. So, and that's kind of, Daryl says the assessment. It could be shadow you to see what skills are necessary. Great. So now we've begun to shift this from, okay, you're already interested, you're ambitious. And so abilities, as Shannon says, they're easier to teach than the other two, right? Because it should be objective. We're coming up to say, okay, we need you to do, reader's advisory. Are you familiar with the tools? Are you, in fact, a reader yourself? There are ways to begin to track with this. So very good. And then I think in addition to offering the training, it's like it's not just the goal has to be more than you have to attend a program. It also has to be set a deadline for this and then come back and tell me how you're going to demonstrate the skills. Okay. It might be there's a shift to a different position, but with training, there must come tracking. Okay. So this is the easier one. Now let's jump to the second. Here's the disengaged star. Let's call her Mary. Mary has the abilities to do her job well. She also aspires to be a leader. She's always taken the initiative to improve her career, but she's so interested in outside things, outside groups and projects. Sometimes she doesn't seem very engaged with the goals of the library or the work of her team. Or as my friend Sharon Moore says, she puts the I in team. So back to the chat, what issues does this pose? And what course of action would you recommend to a supervisor? Right? She's got the abilities. She's ambitious. She may want your job in the future. But how do you keep her engaged in your local library? So I'm looking over to chat. Pause about this and start typing. A little trickier, right? Well, as I'm waiting for some of you to be bold here, I'll start with this suggestion. Okay, you've got her. Okay, ask her to head up collaboration with the local agency or org. Okay, now she is representing the library, right? So that's good. Challenge them with more difficult work. That's good. Assignments that challenge them. Talk to her about how her interest could apply to the library. I think this is a key one. And the notion here is that if you sit down, you say, talk to me about your values. What really matters to you? And then let's look around and see where does that value, where does that aspiration show up within the library? How can you shower that with some of your attention so that you really can rise within the organization and get more connected? I think the other thing is, again, this idea, put her in charge of a project that fulfills her aspirations. Cassie suggests mentoring. I think that's good. Sometimes a way to get someone connected to a larger organization is just start with somebody who's on her level or on her wavelength, to say, work with me on this project. Here's a way, and now I'm going to demonstrate as your mentor, not only the opportunities for growth, but the way to show that we made the organization around us look and feel better. The idea about Daryl says interview, ask what she's looking for, that she's getting inside or not getting inside, all that stuff is good. So, okay, I think you've got this. Ultimately, you may have to recognize that you can get great things out of her while you can, and you may not keep her for long, and that's okay. I think when you hire people to say sometimes you just want to have a shot in the arm to challenge people and get them to stir themselves and rise up. And they may not stay with you. They may leave. They may come back, but encourage people to grow and to engage. Okay, now we'll hop over here to the misaligned star. This is John. So John knows his job. He can do it. He's quite capable. He's very engaged in his work. However, he's not very ambitious and he doesn't show a lot of interest in growing and learning. Well, why is that a problem? He comes in, he does his job, he's good, but it's like there's that spark is kind of missing. So what do we do there? How do we help John step up and maybe grow beyond his good job that he's doing right now? And I'll give you a chance to ponder that, toss down some coffee and see how do we spark his aspiration? Okay, give him a project to oversee. That's good. Talk to him where he sees himself in 3 years. And often someone might say, I see myself right here. I like my job, and I've had people say to me, Sometimes you've got a reference librarian who just lives for the question, and that's a good thing. But we still want them to have that spark that says, there are new reference materials. Or if you're a children's librarian, that there is new research that's coming out here. We need to find a way, and to kind of give you here, ask for his opinions and ideas, talk to him about what he's personally passionate about. So much of this stuff is about managing by aspiration. Who do you want to be? How do you want people to think of you? How do you think of yourself? How do you imagine yourself as a productive, engaged, thriving person in this organization? And then we say, ask them to set goals, try to find what motivates them, gives recognition, put them in a training role. And that's an interesting thing too. Sometimes I find that someone might be kind of coasting in their job, and when they become a mentor and you kind of coach the person who's getting mentoring, make sure that you talk about your ambitions. It kind of fires you up yourself. So in the process of trying to help somebody else grow, you say, I'm not sure that I have been growing as much as I might be. And then I think also this idea about giving recognition, absolutely. When somebody steps up and they do something right, calling that out for them is like, you don't want everything to be externally motivated, but a little bit of status, a little bit of recognition goes a long way. So we got to put them in a plating role, come up with an idea for program newsletter, continuing ed, joining task forces, programmings can be very inspirational. One of the ones that I have seen work sometimes that interests me is like you take somebody that thinks just a good employee, can he be a leader? Can she be a leader? And then get them involved in some kind of a leadership program because it just opens the door. That helps you imagine a different way of being at the job, and it kind of can scoot you into doing something a little more. So this idea about continuous learning is part of the staff success metrics. Absolutely. Okay. So again, I push this out here to say, I really feel like this is an important part of trying not just to say, I'm going to help you, but a way to diagnose where somebody might be failing. And so before I move on from here, any comments about this, any resonance to it, or anything that you feel like maybe it doesn't get at? So just an opportunity to ask some questions. Jamie, I see you popping in to
Yeah,
look over the.
I didn't see any questions come in, but we'll just give it a couple seconds and see if anyone has anything. Jamie, I found it interesting. You mentioned at the beginning uh, how you had when you worked at a big organization, you had a few of these people that you needed to have this 20-second conversation with. And I think it's easy to forget sometimes how just a few of these employees, even on a large staff, can be detrimental toward the culture and the productivity, and all of that. And I guess
Oh yeah.
what made all of you, like, what made you and the rest of your team decide, like, we need to have some conversations or make these changes, even
Well,
in spite of having a big team?
yeah, well, I'll kind of unpack that a little bit. So we were working towards this idea to say we really wanted to get more books in people's houses. And so to do that, we had to get the books pre-processed. We wanted to be on the shelf the same day they hit the bookshelf in a bookstore. And so that required all kinds of changes up and down the organization. And when I woke up, I was like, oh my God, of my direct reports, and I had four and then me, every one of us had one of those people. And they were good people. This is not about their character.
Right.
But it was like in the case, our technical services person, she just felt that we could do a better job of cataloging than anybody in the country. And so if that took an extra week or 2 weeks or a month, then that price was worth it. We were never going to get to same day delivery if that was the case. We had someone else who was a volunteer coordinator, and her idea about the volunteers was, to get them in the back room and to do these tiny little tasks instead of assisting us to do things like RFID tagging so that we could build better displays, so that we could move things in that direction. And so then my approach to this one is I sat down with each of my reports and I said, first, have we ever told people what we're trying to do, why this matters? Did we communicate it? They said, okay, yes, we did. And I said, say back to me what we've said to them. Okay, great. Then it was like, I think that each of these people's behaviors are a problem in the following way. Am I mistaken or is this correct? And they said, no, that actually describes it. I said, okay, Can we now, and so I'm going to set out a course over the next 6 weeks, come back next week with in 25 words or less, what's the behavior of this person that's the problem? Not they're fighting us, not their passive aggressive, no slurs about their content, just specific behaviors that are the problem. And then when they came back, we'd say, okay, now I'm going to sit here as if I'm that person. You tell me in 25 words or less why this behavior is a problem. And boy, was that hard.
Yeah.
Trying to get out of the judgment and get down to the description. And just another kind of example. I had a woman, Margaret, and she was a good employee, but everybody was saying Margaret is so lazy because when somebody would come up to the desk, Margaret was never the first one to get up and to walk up to them. Margaret was focused on the task in front of her, and she just didn't have peripheral vision, and she wasn't using it that way. She wasn't lazy. She just wasn't scanning horizon, right?
Mhm.
And so trying to get it down to the behavior again. And then we said, okay, now we want to talk about what can we realistically expect from our employees? Can you expect them to be happy all the time? No. You can expect them to be polite all the time. And if you have somebody who's, the real problem is, you say, we are trying to build a culture where we're welcoming and encouraging of people's ideas. And at the meeting today, when somebody said, let's try this, you just rolled your eyes, up your hand, and said, as if that's going to work. Okay. Specific behavior. Right? What can we expect? We can expect that you're going to be involved. We can expect that you're going to be trying to, contribute to this kind of culture. And I want to jump over. I just caught out of the
Yep.
corner of my eye the chat. They
Yep.
were taking into account outside reasons for behavior. I had an employee whose husband died. She was off track for a while. Gave her some time, and she's back on track. Absolutely. We are supposed to be kind. But I don't think we're talking about just a one-off kind of thing. If you see somebody who is typically pretty level-headed and suddenly they blow up at something, something's wrong. And probably it's not going to be a public admonition. It's going to be, Jamie, can you join me? Can we just talk for a moment about this? Are you okay? And very often that's going to be the case. But what I'm talking about are the entrenched behaviors that people have never been called on. We get what we permit, and we have allowed destructive behaviors to get entrenched in their performance, and that's what this coaching and this kind of direct conversation is about.
Now I want to play devil's advocate for 1 second. So let's say
That's good because we
let's
need more
say,
devils in the
well,
world.
let's say let's say you have a large staff. I mean, whether it's 20, 50, 100 or whatever. I mean, is it unrealistic to expect that everyone on staff is going to be doing great things, or do we kind of almost have to expect there might be a bad apple in there once in a while? Is that unrealistic to
Oh,
expect?
well, no, there are definitely going to be bad apples, but the point is, by leaving them there, you are making a decision to encourage that culture. You're giving it a toehold in the culture. And I think that again, the idea here is not to be mean. We're not trying to go around and just randomly punish people. We want to build a culture that encourages people to grow, that maintains high standards of professional conduct, not only with the people we serve, but with each other. And that's perfectly reasonable. And in exchange for that expectation, we give you money. And so that's a reasonable kind of thing as well. Okay. And then we have something else over here. What if you've allowed bad behavior and now realize it? Okay, well, good, about time, right? This is the beginning of change is awareness. And so then you say, a good supervisor says, what have I done to cause this? What have I done to allow this? And how can I directly and authentically present the real issue to the person and give them the space and the grace to change, but with consequences? If you say, I require immediate and sustained improvement, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit, and you don't get it, you have to say, we talked about it. I made the expectations clear. You made a commitment to it. I'm not seeing it. This didn't work. And trust me, this is a kind thing to do, not only for your organization, because as a supervisor, that's what you're paid to do. It's also a kindness for the person. Sometimes, if the reason they're acting up or the reason it's such a problem is that they never bought into it in the first place. And if you give them a chance to make a different choice, it frees up a spot for somebody good to come in. I used to think that there were maybe this is still true, that most of our staff divides into thirds. There's a third that they want to do the very best they can, and when you float some new idea at them, they say, I've been waiting for this moment all my life. That's great. Those people are fun to work with. And then the second ones are like, I don't know, but I trust you enough and hold my hand and give me some training and we'll make it happen. And then the third one pretends to be one of the other two. And instead, what they're trying to do is they will do everything in their power to sabotage you at every stage of the game. And if you allow them to do that, you are giving them permission to veto every good thing that everyone else is doing in the organization. And I feel like that's what this session is about. How do you arm yourself, to confront somebody directly with the perfectly reasonable expectations of what a high-performing library looks like.
So I saw a bunch of questions come in. We'll save these more toward the end. And how about you continue with what you
That
talked
looks
about?
good. Okay, good. So the other thing is that around this, you need to have key systems of support. And I started with a 20-second talk, and often that's the last talk you have with the employee. But if the employee doesn't come around, remember to keep a concise paper trail. It may not come to litigation. I've worked with many supervisors and directors who were so afraid of going to court. And I would argue that it's better to get sued than to get blackmailed into keeping someone toxic or destructive on the team. If you got to pay $25,000 or $50,000 to get rid of them, they're gone. But then if you do go to court, you do need evidence. So again, I believe in starting with this kind of that 20-second talk to say, I want to be as direct as possible. I'm not writing you up for this. I just want to, did I ever tell you what I need from you? And did I ever explain to you why this behavior is a problem? If not, then I'm going to give you some time to think about it. I don't want to hear the explanations. I don't want to hear how it's somebody else's fault. I just want to give you a chance to process that and think about it, and then come back and tell me what you decided. This is based on respect. It's not, here's everything you've ever done that's wrong, and I want to run through it all. It's just, here's what we're trying to do. Here's why your behavior right now is a problem. And then for a coaching script, I find that beyond that 20-second talk, these are some good tips for when you're going to sit down with somebody who is starting to drift. And obviously, the earlier you can catch the drift, the better. The 20-second talk is what you do when somebody may not even be salvageable. But here it's like we brought somebody good on board, we oriented them well, we gave them some good training, and now things aren't going right. So the script looks like this. Dawn, I want to set an appointment with you. Can you come in and talk to me? I just want to kind of review where we are and talk about your performance. And this is, not, don't threaten them. This is with smiles, that it's an invitation. Come in and talk with us, set a time. And then the idea is, I believe very much in appreciative inquiry. Most of us, all of us, bring some strengths to our position, and we want to start there. It's so much easier to build on your strengths than it is to fix everything that's wrong with you, right? So this is like the typical strength finders approach to staff development. So you would start off by saying, Dawn, you came in here and I loved the enthusiasm with which you threw yourself into the job. You've been taking all these kind of outside courses as well. You've been very active in the mentor program. I really appreciate your interest and enthusiasm in the job. Okay. And then we get to the rationale for the behavior. Said, but what I'm seeing, Don, is that you're so enthusiastic that the last two times that I've seen you, we've kind of put you on a project, you step in and you take it over and you tell everybody else what they're supposed to be doing. And that behavior, you are growing, that's wonderful, but you're interfering with the growth of others. Let's talk a little bit why we need you to encourage other people to come up to that same level of enthusiasm that you enjoy. And so they have to have the freedom to try things. And what might you be able to do? How can we come up with some ideas to change this behavior? What would be easier for you to do? And again, the focus is always on specific behavior, not a judgment. If you say to somebody, back to the Margaret example, you're lazy, or you say you're mean. No, you're mean. Well, those are accusations. This has to be based on evidence, and it has to be tied to why that behavior conflicts with an important expectation. And then this next one here, like the 3-point contract with timelines, it's like, so what's the expectation? What is it? What kind of actions are you going to take? How will I know that they're happening? And what's the timeline? When will this happen? Very often in HR, the idea is that if you're asking for a personal improvement plan, You say, I need immediate and sustained improvement in this area. And so we're going to follow up and to come back and say, did I see that? But now it's not like, well, I'm going to give you a report card for you, how you're doing. I really believe that a good coach is to say, how did this feel to you? What did you find that was hard? What did you find that was easy? Give me an assessment of your honest notion of how well you're doing with this concern. Is there something that didn't work? Is there something that did work? What can we build on? And then after this, once it's gotten to this point about we're coaching and I'm trying to track you, if there's a contract and there are timelines, you have to keep a record. And it doesn't have to be fancy and it doesn't have to be very detailed, but it's like a Word document that you keep for each employee. And here's the date when I met. These are kind of the key comments that they made, the words that they're using that indicate their frame of mind. This is my feedback to them about their behavior and whether or not I think they're making progress. Okay, so this seems like a good place to kind of stop and see how are people looking at that. Is that all pretty straightforward?
Yes.
And again, the idea about the setting an appointment and all this stuff is to give somebody a chance to prepare. You don't want to blindside your employees with the problem. And you do want to be clear, again, that before you're calling out somebody's behavior as a problem, that you always go back and tie this, here's what we're trying to do. We are trying to accomplish something in particular. Yes, Jamie.
So when's the difference between using this, more of the planning and the script, as opposed to the 20-second quick one? Are they the same? Or are they different? In what situation would you use one or the other?
I started with the 22nd one because this is what happens when things have gotten bad,
Okay.
really bad.
Okay.
And now, and in that case, I'm talking about the employee whose problem has been a behavior for a long time and nobody has done anything.
Okay.
And to be brutally frank about this, when we did this with our 5 people, one did come in the next day and said, by God, you're right. I'm in the wrong place. I'm so sorry. I'm leaving. Someone else said, it's going to take me a week, but I'm leaving at the end of the week. Someone else said, I'm going to stop fighting you, but I got to get my son through high school. So I'll be around for a year, but I'm not going to fight you anymore. I understand. And someone else said, I'm going to turn this thing around, but didn't. And someone else fought us every step of the way. Bottom line, I really think sometimes when you get to that spot where it's gone on and on and on for a long time, it's really hard to save them. And we lost every one of those 5 people. But the organization after that, it was like we took the sky was the limit. Suddenly, all this stress and tiptoeing around and trying to, compensate for other people's misbehavior, it was just gone. And then we could bring in someone who believed in that. And then amazing how much progress you can make when people have been telling you it's not possible, it can't happen. Remove the toxic employees. Turns out it could be done quite easily.
So during the other discussion, a couple questions came in that are along these lines, and I kind of grouped them together. So what if you've allowed bad behavior, now realize it? What if the previous director allowed this for decades? How do you address this behavior that's been going on for years from the staff you've inherited? So that's when you would use more of this approach, this coaching script.
Right. And so I think that the coaching script is probably the place that most of us will start. Most of the people that I meet as supervisors in libraries, they want to believe the best of people. But the problem is we often make apologies. So you start off by saying, the problem is you are always disrupting the work of others. That's the behavioral problem. I'm giving you an assignment and then I step and I say, I don't like the way you're doing it, so I do it all over and then I complain about your behavior to it. Okay. They have that kind of behavior. And so very often, nice people as supervisors say, I know you're a really good person. I know that you're just trying to help. I know that, all these ways that weaken the point that you're trying to make. And I think that the significance of that 20-second conversation is you're being just as absolutely direct as possible. And when we would practice it, and I really think rehearsing that talk is a good idea, I would say, if you're still talking after 20 seconds, you don't know what you want to say.
Yeah.
You're like, get it down to, this is the expectation, this is the behavior, think about it. That's the whole script. But you typically, as a new director, you're not going to start off with that. It's like, so Jamie, tell me about, I see you've been here for 10 years. Can you tell me how that's been for you? What are you proud of? What have been the challenges for you? I mean, you're going to slide into that. But if this kind of coaching script doesn't work, I've diagnosed this, we've given you resources, we've given you mentoring, we've given you the opportunity to try projects, we've addressed all these different issues, and nothing is changing. You can't just keep doing that, right? Then there has to be a consequence.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, that word about consequences is that what we're doing is we're giving people opportunities and we're giving them acknowledgement for their effort. But at some point, the consequence is personal improvement plan, keep working on these things. And as long as I see progress, you still have a chance. Or I don't see progress, and let's not beat each other up about it. It's not working. Try to find something that I would rather give you a recommendation for something that fits you better than keep you here where it's obvious that you're causing damage to our organization. Okay, so I'm actually ahead of myself. I rushed through to make sure I would have enough time, and I have enough time. So that's good. We can do more questions. But I really like this idea, and I'll give you the nice happy picture that we go back to diagnostics. I love this quote by John Cotton Dana. The library is a center for public happiness first and public education next. And so my Nietzsche quote is he says, we are fully mature when we recapture the seriousness of a child at play. And so the whole point about this is to try to figure out a way to help our people succeed. Okay, so I'm just kind of putting this back to the worst case because I feel like this is kind of where the rubber hits the road. But with this, I find that for most management tracks, people do want to kind of poke and say, let's talk about some of the cases that you struggle with. So I'll just look at
Yeah,
this. Yeah, go ahead,
yeah,
Jamie. If you want to summarize for me, that'd be great.
absolutely. And some more questions have came in since I think I kind of opened Pandora's box when I started asking, but that's good. That's what we want.
That's right.
Um, one of the questions that came in is, what do you do about those cases where behaviors are so cleverly subtle, facial expressions, tones of voice, etc.? There's not a particular behavior to point to, but an apparent attitude. How do you measure that? How do you document
Yeah,
that?
one of the ways, and this is just this isn't so much a coaching thing as much as it is owning the culture. And I find like I'm sure all of us have had jobs before where you get into a really snarky, sarcastic group of funny people. It's funny, and everything that comes up is like it's the rolling the eyes, it's the cutting comment, it's competition. It's like, well, I'm smarter this week. I've got the funniest thing. What happens if you just put on the table, who do we want to be? What kind of culture do we want to have? Because there may be some people that will be very clever, be very sly, be having a wonderful time cutting everybody else down, but dragging everybody else down. And I think that trying to provide a space where you are being honest about this and say, well, okay, what do I do to set a culture? And how does that play with some of the rest of you? So like there's some people here that they want to gamify everything. They enjoy the competition. But there's someone else over here who feels like, boy, this competitive thing really is not my style. I'm a collaborator and I have difficulty with that. We need to put the issue on the table of how we treat each other and what kind of culture we want to begin to identify the places where there's a hitch in the giddy up.
Thank you. What is a realistic time to allow questionable behavior, knowing an employee is going through issues outside of the library?
I think that, again, the job of a supervisor is to ensure the success of the library. Okay. That's why we pay them. And so ideally, the way you do that is by encouraging and supporting the people that you have. But if they're going through something that is interfering with their ability to do the job, then you say, it looks like you're having a tough patch. How can I give you some time? I need you to have your head in the game. It looks like that's really hard for you right now. What can we do for the next 2 weeks to give you some time to deal with this? So again, it's understand what the issue is, accommodate to the best of your ability, keep the goals of the organization paramount, give them some time, but it's not a forever pass.
Thank you. Another question, how do you address an employee that laughs a lot and very loudly? I know it sounds a bit petty, but it can be very annoying and carries through the building. I've talked to this person, but it continues. Who would have thought that laughter would be an issue? Well, I could see I could see that also being an issue, maybe if someone is laughing at things that are not appropriate to be
Right,
laughing at. So there
right.
could be that happening as well. Any insight on that, Jamie?
Well, and it kind of goes back to appreciative inquiry. Thank God for happy people, right?
Yeah.
And if and we're going to need laughter, I think, over the next several years. So, like, begin with this. I'm delighted by your spirit with this one, but just wanted to let you know, how can I give you some feedback when I see you kind of oscillating out of control? Because what happens at that point is now you are interfering with the other people's use of the library. And that's my only concern. I'm glad that you're happy. I don't want to try to make you depressed. I want to turn that smile upside down. It's like what I want to do is just say, let's be mindful of the whole service environment. We have other people in the building. And then it's like, give me triggers. What can I say to you that would convey this to you? Try to engage them in some sort of process to help them manage their own behavior. That's what emotional intelligence is. Awareness, commitment to change, and then action.
Thank you. What what do we do with an employee who is generally unhappy in life and that despair is projected constantly at work?
Yeah, well, there you go. There are many people, and in fact, we just finished doing this big community survey in Garfield County, and we found that the number two topic on everybody's mind was mental health, and it was depression, it was anxiety, and it was loneliness. And so, welcome to the human condition. Every single one of us is dealing with that, and I think that. It's a combination of things. It is certainly, I hope, kindness. I hope it's the ability that we have to say, I've just noticed you seem kind of down. Do you want to talk about it? Is there anything we can do about it? There are all these systems of support that you hope we have. The employee assistance program. If you're running into difficulty, here is a counselor that you can call. It's telehealth. It's something that would connect you to some other resource. Again, it's the offer of we have paid time off. Are you using that to recharge yourself? Let's talk a little bit about, some training programs, ways to manage stress, things like this. But I want to keep coming back to this point about the reason we have supervisors. Your job is to ensure the health of the library.
Mm.
And if somebody's behavior is beginning to interfere with the health of the library, you say, you need to take some steps to change this because we can't allow this to continue to the point where everyone else is suffering too. How can we help you? So boundaries, I think, are important.
Thank you. Here's kind of a situational one. You have a staff member who's had several coaching meetings with the director and their supervisor. This person goes off the rails. Then we've had the 20-second conversation. This person does the job just enough that there isn't really anything to address. They are friendly when other staff are around, but resistant to speaking with administrative people when no one is around and doesn't want to take on anything new. Deny that they have toxic behavior
Right.
and tell other staff they're being targeted. What is next for us
Mhm.
to try?
Okay, so it still comes back to at some point, it's okay, they're not causing any problems, but they are. You just described all kinds of problems. They're
Mhm.
still doing behaviors that are creating conflict and undercutting the ability of the library to perform. And I think again, it's like when someone falls into this, it's not that hard to catch them. I mean, you will be able to detect those behaviors. And here's where I think the problem is. We say, okay, we started with the friendly discussion. We started with the willful attempt to coach you into better behavior. We had the 20-second talk and nothing changed. Fire them. It's time to fire them. And you sit down and you say, I appreciate the work that you put into this, and here's what I can say about your performance going forward. I said, but it's not working out. My job is to ensure that we have a high-performing team, and it's just not working out. And again, it's not confrontative, it's behavior-based, it's expectation-based, and it's your responsibility to make sure that that happens. And I think instead, we either continue to make excuses for them or we transfer them to some other department. So the whole problem starts all over with a new department and an agency. And sometimes we just have to own up to our responsibilities.
So a follow-up to that, Leah asked, telling someone they are toxic is not talking about specific behavior though.
Right.
So also do you
Toxic
have to
is a
be,
judgment. That's right. And
okay.
so in these kinds of discussions, I've had people say like, well, I don't know how the union would feel about this or the city would feel about this, but as long as you are being specific, this is the expectation and it's perfectly reasonable for the library. And this is the behavior that violates that. It's not a judgment about the person. There are all kinds of people that are wonderful folks that are just in the wrong job or
Mhm,
not equipped to do that particular job.
mhm.
So it's not about the person, it's about the behavior. And you have to do the homework in your own mind to make sure that you've got the right behaviors, that you can actually, witness them and that you're not just making it up or somebody's projecting it, and that you have communicated that expectation before you start critiquing the behavior.
Thank you. How do you feel about performance improvement plans or PIPs? Are they effective or are they just prolonging the inevitable separation? Maybe you could talk about that, or maybe you could give some examples of when you've done them and they have been successful.
No, and I think that very often it's because the supervisor isn't clear about what they expect. And so let's say someone, and people will often say this person's been here for 20 years, 30 years, and you can well understand that the job that they were hired to do and the people they were hired to work with and the culture that existed then probably have changed quite a bit since then. And so has there been that kind of let's catch up, let's talk about how things have changed. Let's talk about this. So often people get locked into a behavior just from habit and routine, and it takes a while to get them out of it. So I think that's the right place to start is to say, let's review those expectations. Here's where we are today. These are the kind of behaviors we need. Start focusing on that and let's hold each other accountable for that. That can be a shift for people. And depending upon how entrenched they are or how self-aware they are, maybe it's not going to work, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. But the reason I talk about all these other things is like, it doesn't do any good to get rid of the wrong person if you don't know how to choose the right one. And so the idea that you can just, wait for somebody to make a mistake, catch them at it and fix it. Well, no, we can do a better job of setting somebody up for success by being clear all the way back in that when we recruited somebody to apply, I like what I'm seeing with you. That's what we're looking for. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. So all of this HR management is not just talking to people when things go badly. It's trying to set them up for success.
Thank you. There's two questions they're very similar. I'm going to try to combine them a little bit. They have to do with having a long-term employee that you've inherited and doesn't quite meet the standards of the job description, uses age as a crutch. How do you stay away from discrimination for someone's age?
Right.
And the same thing, how do you haven't gained, what do you do when you haven't gained any traction with up and coming technology and programming styles?
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it?
Mm.
And again, it's clearly discrimination just by age is verboten. You can't do that. But it's not about age, it's about behavior. And so I think again is I think as kindly but directly as possible, you say to somebody, Marianne, you've been here for 35 years, and we have now adopted, we think, the best approach, which is I'll make up something, a spreadsheet-based management of, collecting some circulation statistics for interlibrary loans. Okay. Here's the Excel spreadsheet. We have 3 other people that are doing it, working very well with it. Looks like you're having some trouble. How can we help you? How can we set this up so that can we mentor you? Can we give you a class? Can we sit down and work through this for you for 3 weeks? But we need to have you up to doing this. How long do you think it'll take you to get there? And again, it's always involving the person that you're coaching in the process. You have a decision to make. This is how the job is changing, and yeah, it may be more stressful. Yeah, it might be, more technologically involved, but we need you to do that. We'll help you do it. Are you willing to? And if at some point they say they are not or they can't, as objectively as possible to that behavior, you say, it's not working, Mary. It's time for a change.
Thank you. Do you have any pointers for dealing with two employees who just don't like each other to the point where one person asks to not work in the same shift or overlapping shift with the other person?
Yeah, there are times when tough love, I think, is really necessary, and that might be as like, look, you don't have to be friends, but you do have to be colleagues. We are paying you both to do this job, and We will not tolerate, like it can be a severable offense to say that you're going to keep creating problems with somebody. You're both doing library work. It's good work. Find a way to make this, to make it right.
Speaking about the technology part of it, that last question, I forget who it was, but I attended a conference where a library director had her new staff, would be tested on technology competencies, like
Yeah,
basic
yeah,
things about internet searching, allowed them, had them do training, had lots of opportunities for them to train, to practice, and within 6 months had to take a test. If they failed the
mhm,
test, they were fired. And in the conference session, like there, you could kind of hear the gasp. And she's
right,
like,
right.
but I will tell you, in 5 years, one person has failed has failed this test. And she said, as a librarian, as a community leader, it is our job. We have to know how to direct people to things. You have to know how to use the internet.
That's right. You have to be competent.
You have to know how to answer an email. We have
Yeah,
to be community leaders in this. So it is our role. And I just thought that was really interesting that yes, like
yeah.
we're going to give people opportunities to be trained on these types of things, but that is our job as a public library. Um, we have two more questions.
Well, I just want to say before you leave there, like I'm very
Yeah,
much of that camp. And as I mentioned, I believe very much in having very strong training programs at every library. And I think that one of the things that trainers can help you when they're doing that early orientation and early training, if they come to the supervisor and say, you know what, she's just not getting it. Like, I don't think she's got it. That's the time to take action. It's like, don't wait a year, 2 years to before you say, well, they just never quite made it. It's like, be clear about those objectives and give them early feedback. And if it's not working out, you're not helping anybody by keeping them there.
agreed. Thank you. What if your boss engages in the bad behavior? Would it be appropriate as a subordinate to have the 20-second talk with them?
Yeah, I think about this one time where I had a president of the board when I was a director, and he let it. We kind of got in this deal where every time I would come into a board meeting, he would attack me through the whole board meeting. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Why did you make that decision? Second guessing. You didn't consult anybody. And so I said, Bob, can we go out for coffee? And so I said, boy, sure seems like I'm on the different wavelength from you here lately. Is it time for me to be looking for another job?
Hmm.
And he said, well, I certainly wouldn't stand in your way. I was like, okay, there we go, pretty clear. And then I did something that, and this doesn't always work if you just have one boss, but I went to the whole board and I said, I've had this discussion with the board president. Seems like I'm kind of not on the same wavelength. I'm looking for other jobs. And then the other board members said, oh, Bob, we don't agree. And I had this kind of realization that I don't just work for one person, I work for this corporate body, and you have to kind of check those things. And so how does that apply to somebody when you work for the director and it is just one person? It's like, so I still think it's fair to come up and say, boy, I feel like here's my behavior, and it doesn't seem to be meeting your expectations. It would really help me if you could clarify those expectations. Is there something that I'm doing in my behavior? It's like you have to be the grown up when the other person is the child. And so, again, this script, this 20-second talk is still the right idea.
Yeah.
It seems like I'm not doing what you need. Can you help me understand why I'm irritating you? Can
Mhm.
you help me understand these expectations? Because I don't think
Mhm.
I'm getting it. And so there's a little bit of vulnerability there to open it up, but it all comes down to expectations and behavior.
And as a final question, this kind of goes with that. What if you have a supervisor that just has a different management philosophy than you do? Are we stuck with that? Is that why they're the manager and we're not? 'Cause, how do we
Well,
handle
there are good managers and bad managers, right? And I've always maintained several things. First, I've learned more about leadership and management from really bad managers than I have from good ones, right? Oh, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. But recognize too, not all managers stay, right? And and you have the right, you have the ability, you have the liberty to play the exit card.
Mm.
If you've done everything that you can to thrive, and most people leave their jobs because of the boss, you've tried everything you can, it can't change, you have the right to leave. And sometimes that can be very painful too, but like life is short. Don't spend all of your life in misery.
Management is hard. Can that be the summary of this?
No, management is fun. Management is fun because we are in a position to make real
True.
differences in people's lives.
That's true.
We have the power as it is to say not only to help people grow, but to turn people's individual passion into institutional excellence.
Hmm. I like that. Thank you for correcting me on that. I'm gonna remember that. So thank you. Wow, thank you, Jamie, for taking all the questions. Thank you, all of you, for your questions and engagement. That was a lot of fun. We are at the end of our first day of sessions. We come back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We have tracks in internal communications with me, and Leah will be running the small libraries track. So we have a full second day of sessions. You can still register. As Leah mentioned, there's a survey at the end that will pop up. We appreciate your feedback. All of the resources will be posted to our website by Monday at the latest. Again, thank you, Jamie. Thank you to all of you. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and hopefully I will see some of you tomorrow. If not, have a great rest of your day. So long.
Thanks, everybody.